Tide meeting down on the coast tonight about, of course, the salmon fishing regulations that just came out. So anyhow, this is sort of like a presentation, but it's kind of my view of the state of the fishery right now, and some of the ideas I think why it got to where it is. So if you have some questions on that, just kind of save them for the end. And it doesn't have to be a question, it can be just your point of view of what's happened and what has been going on. So, you all know me, I think I know just about everybody in here. My name is Basok, and I'm the Vice President of the Salmon Society. And I've been involved since inception since 1984. And I fished the river all my life. I'm 7 years old now, and I fished it for 65 years. So when I caught my first bullhead at the Agassiz Bridge, I thought they heard me in Agassiz. And I'm also the angler at large rep for the Upper Fraser Valley Sports Fishing Committee, is one of the committees that we're on. And I'm also the Sports Fishing Ambassador for the Freshwater Fisheries Society of BC. So this is sort of about the state of the fishery in 2019 in my estimation. I've been involved in the Fraser fishery for 64 years. And I've seen massive changes during that time. The main one being the slow but steady decline, and we've all noticed this, of our salmon stocks. Why? There's not any one reason, but a combination over the years that have contributed to this. Over-harvesting with non-selective methods, and I don't care who you are, what color you are, whether you're a commercial fisherman, a First Nations fisherman, or a rec fisherman. The gill nets are not a great way to fish in a mixed stock salmon migration river. You just cannot selectively fish one stock of salmon, because there's 10 stocks of sockeye come up this river. There's 7 or 8 stocks of chinook. There's several runs of gold, but they all come mixed together, overlapping. You cannot gill net fish selectively, and that, I'm sure, over the years has had a major effect on a lot of our fish. Over-harvesting with non-selective methods. Gill nets, as I mentioned, fishing technology from the 50s to now is gone up 1,000%. I mean, when we fished the rivers, like a lot of you remember, I mean, we started fishing in the bed, we were using 19-pound bell line. It was like a coil spring. You hooked the fish, you had to go 10 feet before you even knew you had a bite. I mean, now we have braided lines with no stretch, graphite rods. I mean, technology, monofilament gill nets, drift netting. I mean, the technology has outdone the resource. That might have been fine the way they used to fish when there was 15 First Nations fishing the river, and there was 50 or 60 or 100 sports fishermen fishing the river. But now, with the technology we have, with jet boats and nylon gill nets and beach stains, you know, these numbers, I mean, this has all helped to decimate the numbers of the fish, among poor management practices by DFO. A large increase in the number of anglers and First Nations fishers in the river is also, 40 years ago, there was not many people fishing the rivers there is now. There's a lot more First Nations fishers now. The only fishery that probably has not increased in the Fraser River is the commercial fishery, below the Portland Bridge. Those guys have been down, down, down. They hardly get to fish ever in the Fraser River in the last few years. Another thing a large increase in numbers of anglers and First Nations fishers in the non-tidal Fraser, therefore more harvest and not enough accuracy in what is being taken. You all know that. What goes under the table. And I mean, they were trying to tell us a few years ago in September, from the September 5th to the 15th, in 10 days, we harvested, the sports fishermen, even though we were bottom bouncing too, because we harvested 700 chinooks a day. 6,995 chinooks by sports fishermen from Hope to Chilliwack. Can you believe a number like that? When has anybody ever seen 700 springs caught a day on this river? Never. And yet they come out with those numbers, and then when we go to negotiations, they give us these numbers, and how can you beat that? So we've had a lot of conversations with DFO and their staff about we have to get a far better method of determining how many fish are being caught, because those are so far up to lunch they're not even funny. Another reason, drought in the interior. If you go to the interior, I know several people that work for fisheries in the interior of BC. I'm talking Kamloops North. Some of the creeks are drying right up in the summer now, and ones that aren't, they're 24 to 27 degrees. Salmon cannot rear in 27-degree water. You just can't. No salmon can. So in some of the bigger rivers, like the Thompson, and they have all these tributaries, well, when it gets hot like that, all the fry and everything are dropping down into the Thompson for cooler water, so now they're competing with the other salmons that live there all the time. So now you've got overcrowding. I mean, the nutrient level has to be there, or they're just not going to make it. These are all reasons that we haven't got a lot of the habitat up there that they need. A lack of knowledge of ocean survival. When the fry and the smolts head to the Pacific, they have no clue what's happening out there. You may have seen on TV here in the last couple months, there was a ship went out into the North Pacific. It's the first time they've ever done this in the winter. And they went out there and they learned tons of stuff. They just came back. They were out there, I believe it was for 2 months, 6 weeks or 2 months. And they said they learned a lot of stuff. And they have a short report they brought out already. One of the things they did say, they found almost no pink salmon, and they found enormous numbers of coho. Whether they're all from Alaska or from BC or whatever, they don't know that yet till they finish their DNA analysis. But they learned a lot of stuff, and this is just the first time they've ever done this in history. Of course, this should have been done 20 years ago. You got to know what's going on in the ocean, and you'll never be able to predict what's coming back. And one of these this is the political part of the management of the Fraser River fishery, the lack of political will in the last 25 years to save the salmon. I mean, not so much maybe now because we're at that point where it's not that great, but nobody in government has really pushed hard to save the salmon on the West Coast. I mean, we had a SEP program, a Salmon Enhancement Program, that started, I believe the first year was 77. And the budget was 40 million. Well, the budget now is down to like 22 million. So they've cut back. Every year they cut back. Well, how can you get your fish back, especially when the numbers are all going down, if you keep cutting back on the rearing and on the hatcheries and all the habitat protection? Cutbacks in hatcheries and hatchery programs, not every river needs a hatchery, but the wild fish will not recover in most rivers on their own at this stage of the game. They just can't. So it could come down, we have hatchery fish or we have no fish. And I'm sure every one of you here says, let's have it. I mean, we just want the opportunity to go out and catch a fish, and we don't have to catch a whole bunch to make us happy. But I don't want to sit in my living room and not be able to even go down to the river to go fishing. Also now, when salmon numbers get this low, they start picking on the sports fishermen even more, because now the numbers are low, any kind of impact is noticeable right away. And you'll notice that in pink salmon. Pink salmon got a 2-year life cycle. The last 2 years of pink salmon have been lousy. And it's because when you do damage to pink salmon on the year that they're here, with whatever, beach staining or just low numbers, or they get fished in the ocean, or their habitat is ruined, you see the results immediately. It doesn't take like spring salmon 4, 5, 6 years to get back. It happens in 2 years. So I'll guarantee you, if we get pinks back this year, it'll be surprising, because they did not have a big run of pinks. I mean, they were expecting 30 million last time, and I think 13 showed up. So this year, you can imagine what we're going to get. So it's now that we can have an impact on those fish. And this is why you're seeing the closures. The last thing, or one of the last things I want to talk about, there is concern about there not being enough Chinook salmon for the whales in Georgia Strait to eat. So cut back sport fishing for Chinook in both salt and fresh water, so they do not starve to death. Really? I mean, it's really bad. Sad state that it takes a couple of whales to die in Georgia Strait to get the attention of DFO that our Chinooks are in trouble. Well, we've been telling them that for the last 20 years. Why aren't you guys doing something about our salmon, especially the Chinooks? So enough said. What is being done? There's recently been a push to unite all user groups, such as First Nations, commercial interests, and recreational groups under a common umbrella to try and get back what we all want, the salmon back in our rivers. The first meeting was held a couple of weeks ago, and actually Dean and I attended it. And it was a good attendance, actually. There was about 45 or 50 people there, and these weren't just Joe Blows, they were the heads of a lot of the organization, First Nations, commercial people, and recreational angling groups. It was a feeling out meeting, and as you can imagine, this will be a slow process. But there was no finger pointing or anything, and it was stated at the start of the meeting there would be none of that, because we all want to be able to get along, and we want to try and solve this problem. But it's something we probably should have started 25 years ago. We did try once with some dialogue many years ago, but every meeting you went to, and pretty soon there was only 3 of us there, instead of 20. There has been some recent announcements of increased production for Chinooks at some of the lower mainland hatcheries. Now I've heard it's going to be from the interior too. In fact, the interior hatcheries that don't have room to raise more Chinooks, those Chinooks will be sent down here as juveniles, and they'll be reared at the hatcheries in the lower mainland, then taken back up country to be released. There's also put out announcements of increased production for the Chinooks, but at the same time, I think you saw this on TV, $150 million over the next 5 years to help the salmon get back on the road to recovery. Hopefully they don't spend $100 million of that on administration. Because you know how that goes sometimes. The newly formed Fraser River Sport Fishing Alliance, FRSA, is trying hard to get off the ground by uniting all recreational sport fishing anglers and groups under one common voice to deal with DFO policy concerning our salmon resource. And we do have a lot of meetings with DFO, and you can't totally blame them in one way because they're trying to run our salmon fishing from the East Coast. They've already screwed up theirs years ago. Now I guess they want to do us. I mean, it's really difficult, and you got to go through all the political hoops just to get anything done. We're on the verge now of when sockeye aren't open. They will have the ability, by the sound of it, very quickly here, that they can put gear restrictions in. So when the sockeye aren't open, you won't be allowed the bottom bounds. We as the Fraser Valley Salmon Society did get the Chinook back for the recreational anglers in 1984-85. And we went out and had a protest. Hey, we told Global TV, those people, come on out to the river. We got something you're not going to believe. What do you mean? Well, we're going to go against DFO, and with salmon are closed, we're going to kill one. We went across from Wellington, killed a 20-pound spring and hung it in the tree. Fisheries came out and watched. But the fishing at that time was very unequitable. The commercial guys were fishing every year for Chinook. The natives were fishing for Chinook, and we weren't. What's wrong with this picture? DFO, as soon as he saw the global guys come along, I don't know how long it was, what was it, Chris, a couple weeks later, that they, all of a sudden we had an opening.
Yeah, well, we had that meeting with the fisheries minister.
Yeah, and all of a sudden things happened and things became much fairer. But at that time there was a large discrimination against us. Now there really isn't as much. But with the recent announcement of no Chinooks for recreational anglers this year for parts of the tidal and all of the non-tidal Fraser, it would not look good to protest over who gets to kill the last fish. And we don't want to do that, because protesting because we can't go fishing for Chinooks right now just wouldn't look good to anybody. There has to be some other ways, and this is why we're involved in so many subcommittees and everything right now, trying to get along with everybody and work together to have that common goal of getting fish back in the river, especially Chinook. The Salmon Society has and will continue to be involved in many meetings and negotiations with other groups and DFO to try and keep opportunities for the recreational anglers on the Fraser open and its tributaries. We are now a support group for the health and welfare of our fishing opportunities and recreational areas on our local rivers, being involved in many aspects of fishing, not just harvesting. I did make out a preliminary salmon forecast that I published. It was in your newsletter, you would have read it. And I did it on a positive note as I could. And so I hope there will be some room for some salmon openings for us near summer's end or in early fall. Doesn't look like we're going to get any Chinooks, but if the pinks do happen to show up out of some miracle, we'll be able to fish for them. Probably hatchery coho, and if the chum hit the 800,000 at Albion's barrier, then we'll be able to fish for them too. They just barely missed it last year. They were down 775 or something. There is miles more to consider regarding our state of affairs, regarding our fisheries, and I mentioned the tip of the iceberg. We as the Salmon Society are glad you took the time to come to this meeting and would like to hear any comments or questions that you might have on the way things are. So there you go.
Thank you, Nick.
So, yes?